Webster Tarpley is an incisive critic of the Anglo-American hegemony, an activist and historian, best known for his book, George Bush, The Unauthorized Biography. He's written several books on Obama, The Unauthorized Biography, Tarpley.net. We've got him on for the rest of the hour. We'll also get to a smattering of your calls on whatever issue they are. Mike, Mary, Tony, Richard, James, I'll get to you. Jerome Corsi coming up on the latest birther issues. We'll get Tarpley's take on that as well. But Webster, you wrote this key article, U.S. and Pakistan near open war. You've had the U.S. helicopter attack inside Pakistan after the bin Laden thing last week. These al-Qaeda commandos attacking this base yesterday. We've got Pakistan openly in their major papers saying, yes, al-Qaeda is CIA run now. Pakistan's running to China and Russia. Hamid Gul's come on, the former head of Pakistani intelligence, basically concurred with what you're saying here. Any attack on Pakistan will be construed as an attack on China. The Chinese government has now said. This is what you talked about 6 months ago on this show, as where you saw the next flare-up happening in the Brzezinski model. Dr. Tarpley, we're going to break in 4 minutes. You've got the floor. Break down what's happening.
Well, thank you, Alex. I guess the current situation is the following. The U.S. and Pakistan are moving towards an open shooting war. There has long been a latent war, a war going on at a very low level, but this is now escalating towards something much bigger and more visible, and it has to do with this insistence of Obama and his man on the scene now, Grossman, the guy who replaced Holbrooke, the regional envoy, that they can violate the Pakistani border anytime they want to without consulting or even informing the Pakistani government. They can make these unauthorized raids, all on the model of this bin Laden stunt, which I guess we've amply established now as a complete fraud from beginning to end. So the big news, though, is that Pakistan does not stand alone, and that behind Pakistan, which is already a nuclear power, you've got China. And with China, you're talking about intercontinental ballistic missiles with hydrogen bomb warheads. You're also talking about $2 to $3 trillion worth of U.S. securities that could be used as a strategic weapon in its own right if things got really, really extreme. The news is, according to the Times of India, that the Chinese have issued this ultimatum. They did it in a typical low-key, rather polite Chinese way. It was done privately. It was done during the U.S.-Chinese strategic dialogue here in Washington 2 weeks ago. Would have been delivered by Vice Prime Minister Wang Qishan, and it essentially was the Chinese saying to the United States, any attack by the United States on Pakistan would be construed as an attack on China. So if you attack Pakistan, you're attacking China. You quarrel with Islamabad, you got grief with Beijing. And that is a language of ultimatum that we have not heard. The last time I can find that anybody issued an ultimatum to the United States was Khrushchev in 1961, the Soviet leader during the Cuban Missile Crisis and during the Berlin Crisis, which was when this was. The ultimatum was get out of Berlin in 6 months or else something. This is much more specific. It's quite unusual for the U.S. to be on the receiving end. In public and officially, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said last Thursday that everyone must, and that's must, respect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Pakistan. So don't attack them and don't try to break them up. And break them up is what the United States is doing. As a token of the seriousness of the China-Pakistan alliance, when the Pakistani Prime Minister Gilani visited Beijing last week, he was given a rather imposing gift. He was given 50, that's 50, of the most modern Chinese jet fighter aircraft. This is the JF-17, and he was given 50 of them for free and right away. So essentially enough to staff a whole air fleet.
This is an ultra-gigantic escalation. We're going to come back, Webster. You will continue to have the floor to break down with the precision that only you can deliver, and I mean that because Webster 6 months ago laid all this out, exactly how it would unfold, the color revolutions in the Middle East. I mean, go back and watch those shows. Listen to those shows. They're all archived at prisonplanet.tv. Nobody's got a grasp on the geopolitical machinations of the New World Order like Dr. Tarpley, Doctor of History. He's also an economist. I'm Alex Jones. This is the GCN Radio Network, GCNlive.com. Stay with us. Okay, Webster Tarpley, China Their government, as you mentioned, this week and last week, put out official statements. Quote, an attack on Pakistan will be construed as an attack on China. China made good, even when they didn't have nuclear weapons during the Korean War, to ready to have war, full war with the U.S. They were in North Korea, killed tens of thousands of our troops. China is well known by every geopolitical strategist. I want to see if you agree that if they tell you that they're going to do something, they will do it. And they are not to be messed with, and they see this in their sphere of influence. What does this signify that we have these cold wars that are really hot under the name of humanitarian bombings in Libya, Pakistan? The Pakistanis now, in their major papers, and the head of their Pakistani intelligence, the current head coming out and saying, yes, the bin Laden thing is meant to frame us. Yes, the West is running al-Qaeda inside here to try to blame it on our government to start a war. I mean, I don't think folks understand. This isn't Iraq or even Iran. This is a nuclear power that fought India with 3-to-1 superiority to a standstill. These people will fight, are highly motivated. Tarpley.
I think it's an example of the use of irregular warfare, guerrilla warfare, or terrorism beneath the nuclear threshold. The problem the imperialists who run this country have always had with Pakistan is that they can't attack Pakistan directly because, as you say, it's a nuclear power. You can't have a direct military attack. They can respond. So what you've got to do is this subversion, terrorism, guerrilla warfare, irregular warfare. Below the nuclear threshold, they think, but of course the problem is that it always threatens to jump up above the nuclear threshold. It's also worth remembering the way the United States got in there was by an ultimatum to Pakistan. This was in September, October 2001, right after 9/11. Bush called up the president of Pakistan at the time, Musharraf, and said, guess what? If you don't let us use your country for transit into Afghanistan, we will bomb you. And Musharraf said, okay, fine, you can come in. The U.S. was not invited. They basically invaded Pakistan at that time as well as Afghanistan. So what you've got now is a pattern where the U.S., according to the British press, the United States, the CIA, plus the Indians, the RAW, the RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, plus the Mossad, have created their own fake counter-gang Taliban inside Pakistan. So it's something that looks like the Taliban. It sounds.
And by the way, at the Mumbai attack, 3 years ago, it later came out in the Chicago Tribune, even mainstream papers, that it was true. A CIA operative commanded the so-called people attacking, and the only patsy they grabbed, this was in AP, was on 3 different hallucinogens and didn't know who he was. And the head of Indian intelligence said that the West did it, but then he was killed that same day. So that was a black op.
Yes, and that guy, David Headley, has just been on CBS Evening News last night. He's testifying at a trial where he goes through this whole spiel. The Pakistanis did it, the ISI did it, and this is a DEA, CIA agent, informant, whatever he is, telling you all these things. It's crazy. But the Taliban counter gang, now what do they do? You have to look at the pattern of terrorism inside Pakistan is dictated by a military agenda. For example, they kill a Saudi diplomat. When you kill a Saudi diplomat in Pakistan, you're attacking that Saudi-Pakistan axis that was set up by Prince Bandar during his visit to Pakistan at the end of March. They set up this mutual assistance pact, basically. If the U.S. tries to overthrow the Saudi royal family with a color revolution or a putsch, the Pakistanis will send a division of troops to put down the color rebellion. And the other thing is, if the United States threatens the Saudis and says, here, do what we say, or we will feed you to the Iranians, at that point, the Saudis can invoke the Pakistani nuclear umbrella. So this is one of the reasons the United States is so eager to get these Pakistani nukes either destroyed or else seized by the U.S. So if you go after a diplomat, you're attacking that axis. Here, the big one, just in the last couple of days, after I wrote this article, there's a big attack on the Faisal Air Force Base in South Pakistan, near the ocean.
Yeah, that happened yesterday. Stay there. We're going to come back and break down what happened there. Also, the Chinese giving them the 50 high-tech aircraft, what you expect the global engineers to do next, and how their destabilization program's going in Libya. The announcement has now been made. We'll tell you about that coming up.
This is sort of in the north central part of the country, not so far from Abbottabad, where the pseudo bin Laden was supposedly finished off. But the 80 nuclear missiles are there, plus the F-16s that can carry nuclear bombs. So the entire plan revolves around a raid, right? A lightning commando attack, an assault with SEALs and so forth on this nuclear complex. And the idea is then go in quickly and disable the Pakistani nuclear weapons. The British say through the Sunday Express that they're also part of it. So it would be a joint U.S.-British raid into Pakistan to try to seize and destroy these nuclear forces. Now, that would mean that Pakistan would become relatively defenseless against an attack by India. In the background, this whole time in May, there has been a special drill going on of one of the three Indian assault armies, and it's a blitzkrieg drill, nuclear, bacteriological, and chemical, that's going on in the Thar Desert. This is an area called North Rajasthan, and I'm afraid you're going to have to get as familiar with the geography of Pakistan and India as we've gotten with Iraq over the years. So this is a drill that would be designed to cut Pakistan in half in case of war. And if the Pakistanis don't have nuclear forces, they can't defend themselves. That seems to be what all of this revolves around.
And so right as he arrives, the plant blows up. An explosion blamed on gas leak. But Bush in 2008 put out a press release, or 2007, admitting that they've got groups and special forces inside there doing this. I mean, that's policy. And an explosion blamed on a gas leak rocked Iran's largest refinery on Tuesday around the time of a visit to the plant by President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Iranian media reported that up to 2 people were killed. The blast occurred just before Ahmadinejad was to inaugurate an expansion project of the 400,000 barrel per day. And notice they just signed a deal, Iran did, with Iraq for this natural gas. And no, you're not. It's going to blow up, and we'll do it while Ahmadinejad's there. You dovetail that. I mean, this is this soft kill, low-intensity warfare, unconventional commando-type stuff, where they're really trying to start World War III right now. That is the banks that have hijacked this country. Libya, British attack helicopters to be deployed, seen as the next step to ground invasion. EU lines up resolution to start ground invasion that they promised they wouldn't do. NATO hits Tripoli. U.S. says rebels can open office. Bombing begins of their shipyards. Eight warships sunk 2 days ago. I mean, this is going into high gear. Webster, I mean, are they launching some type of? I mean, this is scary.
I think it shows that the U.S. British ruling elite has gone collectively insane, and that they're in a war psychosis. They're also in an austerity psychosis. They're obsessed with the idea that the dollar and all of their derivatives are going down the drain, and they're in a flight forward. So this is a time of tremendous irrationality. The problem we have is that the general public remains unaware of most of these very, very shocking and very, very disturbing and scary events, primarily because the entire left opposition, so-called peace movement and related people, foundation-funded in particular, have essentially given up on opposing Obama.
They're not opposing; they're cheerleading the wars. But Webster, I mean, let's back off from this for a moment. Look. Clearly, it's the old thing of ramming the Branch Davidian compound, saying, come out, we're your friends, and the Davidians run out, and the flare footage shows the special forces shooting them, or you watch a Hollywood movie like Mars Attacks, which is a joke on the Pentagon, an archetype with the aliens running around saying, don't run, we're your friends, and the humans come out of their houses, and the aliens laugh and shoot them. Obama comes out and says, we're your friends, Israel, give back the land to the Palestinians. And then a day later says, look, it was all just a psyop. They're saying, don't run, we are your friends. Netanyahu's smiling about all this. It's total theater as they launch the disintegration of the Middle East. I mean, this is hellish what they're doing.
On the other hand, there is a pushback. On June 15th, there will be the meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And this, of course, is Russia, China, and the 5 Central Asian former Soviet republics there, ex-Soviet space, and it's also got Iran and India as observers. So if we can say behind Pakistan there now stands China. We've also had signals from Russia. Medvedev, who is the soft line, he's the weak side of the Russian establishment. In his press conference last week, Medvedev's line was, we face a new Cold War with the United States because of Obama's insistence on building the anti-ballistic missile systems in Romania, Poland, and elsewhere in Eastern Europe. It's a new Cold War.
And notice Obama said a year ago they weren't going to build the missiles. It's all, don't run where you're friends, and you lower your guard and they stab you.
He lies. I guess that guy was right, the one who shouted it out. So we also have President Hu of China in meeting with some journalists, looking forward to this meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization at the middle of next month. He said, our relations, Chinese relations with Russia, are at an all-time high. They have never been better. So behind Pakistan stands China, behind China stands Russia. That's pretty much the breakdown. But also don't forget this idea of the Pakistan-Saudi alliance that is, I think, very real. It's the cause, it's the immediate reason why this is happening right now in this time frame. And Bandar's Saudi diplomacy with Putin. So it's beginning to coalesce into a coherent bloc of opposition. I would appeal once again to India. India is very, very ill-advised to stay in this U.S.-India nuclear deal. It simply makes India into cannon fodder. It makes India into the expendable continental dagger of the U.S. and the British, a large land power to be used against China, Russia.
And the globalists wreck them even more economically in the process, and then they go into more debt. And the parasitic bankers get America more into debt and bankrupt us more, but we get patriotic in this new giant war. The Rand Corporation said they needed 3 years ago in that very area to, quote, get their new world order. Now we're not worried about the global bankers looting us because we're all patriotic because World War III has started. Now, how do you see this program going? What's the globalists' next move then as they gallop forward into this conflagration?
Well, they're very ill-advised to do so. Right? One of the ways you can tell they're really crazy is they want to attack Pakistan even when their supply line goes through Pakistan. The whole invading force inside Afghanistan depends on this port of Karachi to Khyber Pass 1,000-mile land corridor, which goes right through the middle of Pakistan. And the Pakistani parliament unanimously voted, stop your predator drone attacks, or we are going to cut that supply line for you. Now, in terms of what's going to happen, again, the scenario, terror events that are directed against U.S. forces or even against the Pakistanis themselves would be used as a pretext for Obama to come out and say, with his unbelievable hypocrisy and condescension, he could say, we see that these Pakistanis are incapable of maintaining the security of their nuclear forces. Therefore, we're going to help them. We're going to give them assistance. And I've ordered the Joint Special Operations Command, and the specific group is called Task Force Orange. Task Force Orange would be that group that did that Bin Laden caper, whatever that.
And so the invasion and occupation of the Pakistani bases will be, don't run, we're your friends.
We're your friends.
And if anybody says don't occupy us, how dare the Pakistanis not let us occupy them? Those savages, oh.
But of course, most people in the world don't believe this anymore. It would be good if the SCO or people like this came out and denounced this more obviously. But I'm afraid this is where we're going. So the main thing is, if these things happen, don't believe them and inoculate your friends, neighbors, your readers, your listeners.
I'm just a guy that lives in Austin, Texas. I got 3 wonderful children. I love America. Our country's been an engine of good, really, until the 1960s, and I know Tarpley's done an analysis and agrees with that. And we've gone from being this engine of good to really being the heart of this corrupt world government involved in just such duplicitous evil. And it's all being done in our name. And now our ally, Pakistan, their own governments had to come out and say, Al-Qaeda's run by you, you're staging and all. stop it, don't attack us, and China is standing by to have nuclear war with you if you try, and we've got nukes. This is a big deal, Webster, to have the Chinese government come out and say an attack on Pakistan's an attack on us. And a lot of good old boys are kind of like, well, let's get in a war. It makes me feel manly. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chinese have 1,400,000,000 people. They got thousands of nukes. The traders that run our country have handed over our infrastructure to them. Russia's not playing games. And look, Russia is not on our border trying to get Mexico to attack us. I mean, the point is, this isn't our government that's doing this. This is this corporate elite, and it's coming to a head. I mean, Webster, there's no doubt they just tried to kill Ahmadinejad, blowing up this power plant while he was at it, this gas plant. They're now saying ground forces for Libya, attack helicopters. I mean, can't folks see this is a giant Brzezinskian global destabilization program being launched?
Well, I have the idea that if you go back to the beginning, the time right before World War I, you see something similar. Remember, the Sarajevo assassinations were at the end of June of 1914. The war didn't really get going until the first week of August. So you got this whole month of July 1914. And if you look at the literary materials that have come down to us from that time, you'll see that European public opinion was in a dream. It was in a trance. It was in an elegiac, idyllic mood. They probably sensed subconsciously that something horrendous was about to happen, but this had not yet become conscious for a lot of people. You look at the situation right now, we're closer to a general war than we've been, I guess, since about 2007, since the high point of Bush, Cheney, and the rogue B-52 and the Kennebunkport warning at that time. But right now we've got, the difference is we don't have a peace movement. We don't have any opposition. The people who used to oppose war, they're busy denouncing Gaddafi and supporting the attack on Libya, or they're out there saying Obama is a better warmonger than Bush and Cheney. He's more effective. He brings home he gets his man. So it's a terrible situation. So those of us who can understand this, and your listeners in particular, have to do everything possible to wake up public opinion in the United States. We are drifting towards some kind of general war, some kind of horrendous incident, and we've got this lunatic ruling class. We've got a bunch of incompetent, bungling, utopian people. They're perfectly incompetent. They're not in a position to run the affairs of this country, and unfortunately there's no visible, organized alternative. But at least the idea that the situation in the world strategic sense is more serious, more threatening than it has been in the past 3 or 4 years. This idea we have to get across. And above all, don't believe false flag stories when it's pinned on Pakistan or so-called Al-Qaeda, but with the idea that that's really Pakistan.
Yeah, why on earth would Pakistan or anybody else carry out a 9/11 knowing that they would then be invaded and killed and overthrown? It's like, why would somebody jump in front of a truck? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Look at how they invaded Iraq, saying they were involved in 9/11. Webster, let's shift gears and get into Dominique Strauss-Kahn. There's a reason old-timers built storm cellars in the Midwest and east of many other areas, tornadoes. 500 deaths this year so far, 116 dead in Joplin, deadliest in half a century. Obama says he'll get around to visiting on Sunday. And the storm track, it's up at drudgereport.com. We'll also get a link to storm track up on Infowars.com. Live alert where it's moving towards a Minneapolis liquor store got hit and then got looted. Just a lot of bizarre news coming out on that front. That preacher that said the world would end last Saturday, he didn't mean May 21st. He meant October 21st. This guy's got to be getting paid for this stuff. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Webster, finishing up, what do you think of the Dominique Strauss-Kahn? I mean, I'm no fan of the globalists. I'm no fan of this guy, but more and more they released Sarkozy's top spin doctor and campaign people released on Twitter before he was even arrested. The police had said they had the DNA evidence, or that had been leaked. Now it's admitted they don't have DNA evidence. Kahn, I know, had said the end of the dollar was near. I mean, what's going on here from your intel?
It is the CIA attack on the euro, and we need to remember that all last year, all of 2010 was consumed with the U.S., the CIA, Goldman Sachs, this idea dinner at Moness, Crespi, and Hart that was reported in the Wall Street Journal. The attack on the euro. You can't make the dollar look good, but what you can do is make the euro look very, very bad. You can attack Greece, you can attack Portugal, Ireland, Spain, other countries. You can use credit default swaps for economic warfare. Try to export the depression from the U.S. to Europe. So Strauss-Kahn, now he's the head of the IMF. He wants to be president of France. So his task was to keep the euro together until he could become president of France. Minimally that. That would mean something that the U.S. Wall Street, and of course Wall Street runs the CIA, couldn't accept. So they had to launch some kind of an attack. What it shows, by the way, is the desperation of imperialism. They're knocking over assets that they've used for 10, 20, 30 years, right? They put 15 years of work into building the bin Laden myth. Now they announce he's dead. They have Mubarak in power for 30 years. Then they decide to overthrow him. The power-sharing deal on the International Monetary Fund is really about 60 years old, 60 to 65 years old. It's that traditionally the head of the World Bank is from the U.S. and the head of the IMF is from Europe. And Europe has meant about half of the time, I think we've had 4 French bosses of the IMF, 1 German, so that's about almost half of the 12 IMF heads. You've also had people from countries like the Dutch or Sweden or other places, but generally it tended to gravitate toward France, Germany, the 2 leading countries on the continent. So that's a power-sharing agreement. That basically says we're going to merge the old European imperialisms with this Anglo-American.
But as you said several years ago, this meltdown of the global financial system instituted by the mega banks, they intend to come out on the end completely dominant. And so that this upheaval would be purposefully accelerated during this period, and we're entering this incredible period of dangerous change.
But it also shows it's really not globalism. It's really Anglo-American, U.S., British imperialism. There's no place at the table for anybody who's going to represent a French interest or a German interest or a European interest. First it was going to be stop with the Europeans, now get a third world puppet. Get somebody from the developing sector. Get some British agent from someplace in Africa or something like this. Now it seems to be this woman Lagarde, and Lagarde is the most Britishized, Americanized in the whole French government. If Strauss-Kahn was lonely, he could have called up the Elliot Spitzer dating service. It absolutely makes no sense.
Webster, great job. Tarpley.net. Your story's up at Infowars.com. Thank you for tracking
Alex.
Thank you for tracking the build-up to World War III. Thank you, Webster. We'll be right back with our next guest, Dr. Jerome Corsi, on the latest issue with the birth certificate. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.